Welcome back. As per usual, we'll talk about a word, we have a historical figure to tell you about, a song written in his honor, and a quote. So, grab your favorite cuppa, settle in, and check it out. Hi there, and welcome to This Day in History for February 12th. February 12th is the 43rd day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 322 days remaining to the end of the year, 323 if it happens to be a leap year. Today's word is sports. Now, sports is given as the plural of sport, so let's just take a look at the word sport, and there is a lot to look at. It can be a noun, a verb, or an adjective. And as a noun, sport can refer to physical activity and competition, usually a game or activity that involves physical exertion and skill, often with rules and competition. An example sentence in this context could be, soccer is one of the most popular sports in the world. Sports can be a recreational activity, a pastime, or amusement, as in, hunting was once considered a sport of nobility. A sport can be a lively, good-natured person, one who is easygoing or takes things in stride, as in, be a good sport and help us clean up after the party. Sport can refer to a biological variation, a mutation, or unexpected change in an organism, as in, the pink variety of the flower was a sport of the usual white bloom. Sport might mean jocular or mocking behavior, like a good-humored teasing or jesting, as in, he made sport of my clumsy attempt at dancing. A highly likely event in my case. As a verb, sport might mean to wear or display something proudly, as in, she sported a new leather jacket at the party. To engage in recreation or play, as in, the children sported in the park all afternoon. That sounds like fun. Or, more of a scientific biological usage, sport might mean to exhibit a mutation or variation, as in, the plant sported an unusual color variation this season. Use of the word sport as an adjective is less common than as a noun or a verb, but when you see it, it's describing something, like a sport coat. He wore that sport coat to the casual dinner, or in the biological reference again, one might hear something like the sport mutation that led to the flower's unique petals. The word sport comes to us through French, originally from Latin. Its meaning evolved from a concept of to carry away, divert, or amuse oneself in Latin to pleasure, amusement, or diversion in French, and then narrowed over time to physical games and competition. First known use of the word sport as a noun is in the 1300s, as a verb in the 1600s, and in the meaning by which we know it today, in the sense of athletic competition, we begin to see it in the 17 and 1800s. Sport. The word sports was requested by one of my longtime viewers. The channel handle on this request is at Cindy Meadows 5869, but I know it's my buddy Braxton who requested this word. Braxton lives several states away, and I've never met him in person, but I began hearing from him back in 2020 as I was coming up on a year of having done This Day in History. I was thinking at the time, okay, we just about covered a year, so what's next? I was thinking about quitting, and I began to hear from this individual. I began hearing from Braxton. My communications with the Meadows family convinced me to continue, so if you enjoy these episodes of This Day in History, let's show Braxton some appreciation by commenting with the emoji of your country's flag wherever you live. Just comment the emoji of your country's flag. I think that'll mean a lot to my buddy Braxton. Alrighty, on with today's episode. And with that, this is the birthday of 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, born February 12, 1809. He was born in a one-room log cabin at a place called Sinking Spring Farm in LaRue County, Kentucky. He had an older sister, Sarah, and a younger brother, Thomas, but Thomas died in infancy. The Lincoln family moved to Indiana in 1816 when Abraham was about 7 years old. 2 years later, in 1818, his mother Nancy died from what they call milk sickness. This is way more and completely different from lactose intolerance. The illness called milk sickness was caused by consuming milk, dairy products, or even meat that had been contaminated with a particular poison from a toxic plant called white snake root. Livestock, such as cows, would eat this plant, and the toxin, called trematol, would accumulate in the animal and then be passed along to humans who consumed milk from an animal that had been poisoned in this manner. Anyway, Abraham Lincoln's mother died from this when he was 9 years old. His dad married a widow lady with 3 children of her own named Sarah Bush Johnson when Abraham was 10. As a youth, Abraham Lincoln was what we might think of today as sort of a nerdy kid. He disliked the hard labor associated with farm life to the point that some of his family called him lazy, as he much preferred reading, writing, and what they called ciphering, which was likely figuring out math problems on paper, and he also liked to write poetry. He did not enjoy physical labor, but he loved to read. I can relate. The family moved to Illinois in 1830 when Abraham will have been about 21 years old. Abraham struck out on his own the following year as the family prepared to move again to a new homestead in Illinois. He married Mary Todd in November of 1842 when he will have been about 33. They had 4 sons, 2 of whom died in childhood. Those were difficult times. Abraham Lincoln's love for learning served him well. He became a lawyer and then became active in politics. Eventually, he ran for and became the 16th President of the United States. He served well, saw the country through the war between the states, commonly known as the American Civil War, and was assassinated while in office on May 26, 1865. We've talked about that before in previous episodes. Abraham Lincoln was 56 at the time of his death. We're going to combine an event that happened on February 12th with music. I don't know that I'd necessarily call this a song exactly because it's a bit longer than you might hear played on the radio unless you listen to one of those classical stations where they play classical concerts. It was way back in November of 1923. A band leader named Paul Whiteman had held an experimental concert that combined classical music and jazz. It went well, and he was very happy about that. He set his sights on something a little bigger and bolder. He asked American composer George Gershwin if he would write a concerto-like piece for a jazz concert to be played in honor of Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Gershwin declined on the basis that he felt he didn't have enough time to put anything together. But early in January, a newspaper article came out stating that George Gershwin had begun work on a jazz concerto for Whiteman's concert. Yikes. Gershwin called Whiteman on the phone the next morning and said, "What the heck?" He might not have said what the heck. But in this phone call, Whiteman explained that an arch rival of his, Vincent Lopez, was looking to steal the idea of the experimental concert, and they had to hurry, convincing George Gershwin to compose what would become Rhapsody in Blue. Now, bear in mind that he not only had to put something together, but he had to do it soon enough that the orchestra could practice it and become familiar enough with it to perform it on the projected date of February 12th, about 5.5 weeks after he finally agreed to the project. It only took him about 3 weeks to get it written and then to the arranger for orchestrating. Rhapsody in Blue premiered on February 12, 1924, mostly to an audience of creatives and people in the business, music publishers, writers, conductors, composers, musicians, and singers. Interestingly, that opening bit where the clarinet stretches out the notes into sort of a wail is a technique called glissando, and was initially done that way as sort of a joke on Gershwin in an early rehearsal, but he liked it and said, "Yes, let's do it that way, and add as much of a wail as you can." Gershwin played the piano on that original concert and apparently had not actually written all of that out, but improvised the piano solo, at least partially, in that original performance, and then wrote it down afterwards. So we don't really know exactly what that first performance of Rhapsody in Blue sounded like. By the way, I saw references to that young composer when I was doing this research, so I looked it up. George Gershwin will have been about 25 when he wrote Rhapsody in Blue. Pretty remarkable in my book. Rhapsody in Blue was immediately popular. Paul Whiteman's band performed it over 80 times over the next 3 years, and recordings have sold over 1 million copies. Bands and orchestras all over the world have played Rhapsody in Blue over the last 100 years. Rhapsody in Blue, written by George Gershwin. Link in the description. Dear old Abraham Lincoln. And how about that Rhapsody in Blue? I guess everything's got a story some way or another. More of that history as elegant gossip. Now remember to show my buddy Braxton some love by putting your country's flag in the comments. And let me leave you with a quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln, and that is, "Most folks are as happy as they make up their minds to be." Alrighty, have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time. And I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with a link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That playlist lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include a link to my blog page. It's called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.